Hello, my name is Dana. I'd love to get my story out there to help others. It is about my brother who harmed me in many different ways throughout my childhood. I have memories from the age of 2 when we lived in Fresno, California. We moved back to Pennsylvania when I was between 2 and 3 years old. That is the first time I was molested by my uncle. My mother didn't handle it so well. She just told him not to touch me. Growing up was a mixture of happiness and sadness, depending on who was around. My mother and father were always still together in the home, along with me and my 2 brothers. When my father was around, he would teach me how to cook all his recipes. At 5 years old, I didn't know this at the time, but in the new house, my brother would wake me up in the middle of the night by biting my toes and shoving his pointy, stubby fingers into my feet. And he would just grab me and say, "I'm protecting you from Dad. Dad's coming home from the bar. Get under this bed and hide behind the stuffed animals." That went on for about a year and a half. First grade, I remember him where now I'm under the bed weekly with him. Instead of him just shoving me under the bed and telling me to be quiet, he's getting on top of me and dry humping me. As a little girl, I just felt like, what is he doing with me? I don't even know what he's doing. You know, he was only like 2.5, 3 years older than me. Around the age of 7, in 2nd grade, he started penetrating me with his fingers, Barbie doll legs, markers, and it all happened underneath the bed. And that kept going on and kept going on. It was always on nights that my mother and father were both out drinking. And then on my 8th birthday, which was the first birthday party I ever had for myself because I was born on my paternal grandmother's birthday. My cousin paid for this party for me where my friends got to come. They made a money tree out of me and turned me upside down and then shook all the money out like it was leaves. I thought I was like in heaven. And I remember telling my aunt at that time that my brother was biting my toes and sticking his pointy, stubby fingers in my feet, and it hurt and I didn't like it. Well, my aunt assumed stuff was going on but didn't say anything because it wasn't really her business and she wasn't a biological aunt. So after my 8th birthday party, my mother has us all get ready for bed. I give my younger brother a kiss and a hug and tell him, "I'll see you in the morning. Don't let the bed bugs bite." And then I fall asleep. I woke up to like music playing downstairs. It was my brother who woke me up and I heard those sounds and he woke me up. And this time, he didn't put me under the bed. He took my underwear off and lifted my nightgown up and proceeded to penetrate me with his private part. He covered my mouth with like stinky socks and told me to be quiet or I'd get in trouble. And he wouldn't get in trouble because this is what, you know, brothers do. And the next morning, my mother came up, woke us up, and it was a Monday, so it was time to go to school. Well, she wondered why, and she went in my room and saw blood on the sheets and on the pillowcase. And because I had frequent nosebleeds, I just told her, "Hey, I had a nosebleed that was really bad last night," because I was scared that my brother, you know, I'd get in trouble for this, not my brother. So that continued for 2 more years until I was 10 years old. And me being a little kid, the whole time I thought my father was doing this because he had the same hands as my brother. So this whole time thinking my father did it, I went up to my mother on my 10th birthday and I went up to my cousin on my 10th birthday and I told them both my father was raping me and molesting me. And my mother and my cousin just both said, "No, your father loves you. He would never do that." So I was always spoiled by him and loved by him with his actions during the day. So I couldn't figure out why at least 3-4 times a week, he was physically hurting me. I didn't know it was rape or molestation back then. Well, one day, when I was around 12, CYS showed up, Children and Youth, because my brother had a bruise on his neck. And when his teacher asked him, "Where'd you get that bruise?" his little innocent self said, "My mommy gave me a hickey." Well, that's not what truly happened. And my school teacher thought I was being abused because I became more withdrawn, still doing my schoolwork, still getting straight A's. I just didn't talk, and I didn't want to have friends. And at recess, I would just sit by myself and read a book. I wasn't really out, to make friends. I just wanted to kind of be an introvert and stay inside my head. CYS sat us down in front of our parents, and they asked my older brother if he had been abused, and he said no, even though my father beat my brothers with a paddle, which back then that was perfectly okay. That was perfectly fine. That's what parents did. And then they asked me, and I said no, because hey, I already told my mother and my cousin, and nothing was done. And at that point, my mother was looking at me like, "You better not say anything," looking at my brothers like, "You better not say anything." And then they talked to my younger brother, and he said, "I got this hickey from my mom." And so my mother and my father answered why he had the bruise on his neck. He had simply fallen off of the bunk bed and ended up on a toy up on his neck, so it bruised it. Well, the abuse went on until I was about 15. I was also being physically abused by my paternal grandmother. I was her only granddaughter. So with her physical abuse and what I thought my father was doing with the sexual abuse, I didn't come home one day after school. I ran away to my cousin's house, and my parents asked, what would it take for me to come back home? And I said, "You have to stop drinking. The abuse has to stop. Family counseling would be good." And both of my parents said, "No child of ours is going to tell us what to do." So I told them at 15, I'm not coming back home. Well, my cousin left me move in with her. She got guardianship until I was 18, so no more abuse was going on. I didn't even see my older brother only once who was doing this to me. And I saw him on his 16th birthday. And he had gotten out of Mayview Mental Hospital for a weekend visit. And he had told the doctors there that the reason he tried killing himself was because I left him get picked on, but I protected my younger brother. So I was all upset and mad and telling my parents, "No, I'm not going to family counseling. You wouldn't have family counseling when I asked, and I didn't do anything wrong to Chris." Well, to my brother. And so they leave me alone to go shopping, and my brother's there, and he starts chasing me around the table in the dining room, telling me he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. So as I'm running around, my great-grandmother, who was extremely old, had this telephone where you pushed a button for an ambulance, you pushed a button for the police. And I knew my uncle and aunt, my dad's uncle and aunt, lived the closest, right down the same driveway. So I pushed that button and they could hear me. And I was screaming to my uncle, "He's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me, I can't get out of the house." Less than 5 minutes later, my uncle's there, and he blocks the dining room opening and says, "Squeeze out, run outside." And then he tackles my brother and gets the knife out of his hand, and the cake didn't get cut, and we didn't sing happy birthday to my brother. He simply went back to the mental hospital in an ambulance. So my father ended up going to jail because I was abused as a child. I kept picking abusive relationships with the 2 partners I had. I met my son's father when I was 19. I had my son a day after I turned 21, and I got married the next year. Well, I was pretty much tired of the abuse that my son's father was giving me. So I got a PFA on him. I couldn't support myself and my child. So my father being my father, he asked us to move back in. But I had all this resentment and all this anger because of what I went through as a child. But I trusted, for some reason, I trusted my dad with my son. At 6 weeks old, he told me, hey, you need a break. I'm going to take your son for the weekend. And I never even thought this man's going to touch my son. He was the best grandfather my son could have ever asked for. My son's hero. So we moved back in, and I start college for my first degree, and I'm working as well. Well, that went on until I was almost 26 years old, and I had a friend who was a police officer, and he happened to just say, hey, do you want to go have a few drinks for your birthday coming up? And I agreed. So I drive to the bar that we're going to meet at, and I'm sitting there, and he asked me, Dana, why do you have such a bad relationship with your mother? And I said, she's always selfish. She's put a man before me. She chose a man's private part over me. That's how I felt. And then he asked me, why do you have anger issues with a lot of men? So I go on to tell him how all the things that happened to me from the age of 5 to when I ran away at 15. And at the end of the story, he looked at me and he said, even though I'm off duty, how old are you? And I said, well, you know, my birthday's next week. I'm going to turn 26. And him being the off-duty cop, he said, well, Dana, I have to report this because you're not 27 and the statute of limitations runs out at 27 in Pennsylvania. Well, I begged him and begged him and begged him not to report it because my father was sick and had health problems, and my father was completely different with my son than he was with any of us. He did no wrong in my son's life, and I didn't want my dad taken away from my son. He needed him because my son's father at the time was in jail for the abuse he put on me, and then he moved to New York to run from the charges from abusing me. So he was my son's father figure. 2 weeks before Christmas, they called my father up to the police station, which happened to be literally less than a block away. And I didn't know they were questioning them that day because I was at college. And then I was like, oh, I get to spend the evening with my son. I don't work. Everything's going to be great. Well, they questioned my father. And my father always taught me one thing. Tell the truth is better than lying, because at least you're telling the truth. You won't get as much trouble if you tell the truth and not lie. So the question they asked my father was, did you abuse your children? He told them, yes, I abused my children. But he was talking about the physical abuse that he had done to my brothers when they wouldn't listen. And they just took it from there. My dad came home that day and asked me why they'd be asking him that, and I was pretty much scared to tell him. I just wanted them to drop it. But they got the DA involved, and then I had a hearing with the DA. They were already forcing the issue with my father. 2 days after Christmas, they come and they arrest my dad, and they had called me prior to it. And I had to leave college early. And I had to go to the house and pretend like nothing was going on and say to my mom, hey, you want to take Christian to get a haircut? And my dad said, do you want me to go? And I'm like, no, you have to finish cooking dinner. You can go next time. And my dad was okay with it, but that's not where we really went. We just drove around until the officer called me and said, okay, your father's been arrested, he's been charged, he's been evicted from the premises, he is allowed to come and get his stuff. My father, being the man he is, not breaking the law ever, except for a DUI, Well, when my aunt found out everything, her and my dad's cousin started blowing up the phone, screaming at me, screaming at my mother, saying I'm nothing but a home-wrecking liar. And he was like, oh, Dad did the same thing to me, and I want to go to court with you because I want to tell them. And so I go to court because I'm subpoenaed. I tell the judge, I don't want my dad in jail. This happened years ago. I've forgiven him. Like, I'm an adult. He's the greatest grandfather ever. And my brother stood up and he testified as well. I didn't know that it was all set up for my brother to come into that hearing and say what he said, and then a month later retract it off of the record by writing a letter and saying, oh, my dad never did that. Dana made me come in and say that, and she paid me this much money. It was set up by my aunt, my older brother, and my dad's cousin, that this was going to happen, and I had no knowledge. It was about a year and a half later, and we ended up at the magistrate, and it was the day I had to meet the DA. I sat at that table for 2 hours, bawling my eyes out, begging them, please don't give my dad jail time. He's sick. He's not the same man he was when I was younger. They didn't care. No victim, no crime. State, which I was partially true, but because when it happened I was a child, not knowing that the judge had already put in an order that my father couldn't even contact me or my son. He gets a sentence of 6.5 months to 9, and I felt immediate guilt. I was shunned by his side of the family, and nobody would ask me my side. They all just more or less thought I was lying. He wouldn't do this. We grew up with him. He would never do this. No way. He loved his daughter more than he loved his son. We got there. We moved in on my birthday. My son's birthday being the very next day. We planned his 10th birthday party for that weekend. So I invited my brothers and their partners and my son's friends, and my boyfriend at the time was all there. And after the party, my brother's girlfriend sitting next to me, and out of my brother's mouth goes, I told her everything I did to you under the bed. When I was waking you up by poking at your feet and biting your toes, I admitted everything to her. And I look at my boyfriend, who I had told him about the abuse that I thought my dad did. I just started crying because every memory from my childhood had flushed right back into my brain. So now I'm remembering my childhood totally different, knowing, hey, my brother just admitted to all this stuff. I was in shock. I felt immense guilt that my dad was in jail for something he didn't do. I asked my brother if he could just leave, and I said, just leave. Please just leave. I don't want any more contact with you. His family was right. He never did it. He never did anything. I took my son's hero away from him. So I continued to go on with life. I kept typing my book about my story because I was like, now that I know and I remember everything, I'm gonna write a book. And so I wrote a 27-chapter book, and it's 2010, and everything's good with my son, and everything's good with my boyfriend and my stepson, and going great, except I'm still stuck in that revolving circle of crap. My brother did it, and I can't even tell my dad I'm sorry because the court order says he's to have no contact with me. And then my son comes out in our screened-on porch, and he's like, Mom, I miss Pappy. Can you please contact him? And my son was 12 years old. He just wanted to see his hero. I called him, and I said, Dad, please don't hang up, but click. He hung up on me. Try a second time. Please don't hang up. Christian, click. So my son's not letting up. He's not letting up. And I hand the phone to my boyfriend. He calls my dad, and he explains who he is, and he explains how Christian really wants to see him, and he misses him, and we were willing to do anything to help him see Christian and my dad. So my dad agreed. to see my son the following weekend, which was only like 3 days away. So my son is super, super, super excited to see his grandfather after 4 or 5 years of not seeing him. And he runs up to his pappy, and he just is hugging him and smiling, and my dad is smiling like a part of my dad is now back. It's not missing anymore. So I thought, hey, I'll make a deal with my son's father, and I'll say, hey, we can stop fighting in court and you can have joint custody, but I need you to tell the judge that he needs to put it in a court order that you and I agree to let my son see his grandpap nice. So we did that, and while I was there, I asked the judge, I know you're my custody judge, but can you please just write in there that my dad is allowed around me too? Which it was a family judge, so he could do that. It was my dad's birthday, and I wanted to surprise him with his favorite meal, so I told him I was bringing him dinner, and I gave him the court order. He started seeing my son and I regularly. Well, I told my father the truth and how my brother had admitted to everything, even telling me things I didn't remember. He just said, I'm sorry I didn't protect you. Why didn't you tell me? And I said, I told Mom and I told my cousin, and they told me no, it was never happening, but back then I thought you were doing it. You have the same hands as Chris. All I remember as a little kid was those hands. Until Chris told me at Christian's birthday party that, hey, he did everything. So my older brother admitting to everything, my dad then felt guilt. But we worked around it. I was in counseling, trauma counseling, learning how to redeal and rewire my brain. And about 2 years later, seeing my dad, I call him on his birthday because I'm going to take him out to dinner. And my dad answers his house phone, not his cell phone, and says to me, they put me in a nursing home and I don't want to be here. I'm completely off guard. I'm completely like, what the heck is going on? And I'm saying to him, Dad, I called your house phone. You answered it. You're at home. You're not in a nursing home. So I immediately call 911 and asked him to go do a welfare check on my dad. And I don't know how, but my brother finds out, my younger brother, who he's not talking to me because his wife didn't allow him to have contact with me because my dad went to jail. So I got there and my dad was gone. I find out through my grandmother because my mom's not answering her phone. And I keep saying to my grandmother, something's up with my dad. I can't find him. I called every hospital. I went to his house and his stuff is cleaned out of it. Something's going on. He was sick the last time I called. I called every hospital in the county, plus every hospital in the counties surrounding where I lived, and nobody would tell me anything. No, we don't have it nice here. There's nobody by that name. He was in the hospital. So finally I give in and I call my dad's cell phone knowing something's going up. That moment, his cousin answers, the one that hates me. And I find out that my father has been moved from the city hospital to the county hospital to a gigantic hospital in Pittsburgh, and that he's very sick, and that he had a disease called Christopher Johnson syndrome, and that he couldn't see anymore. He couldn't feel anymore. He couldn't taste anymore. He couldn't eat anymore. He didn't even want to tell me that. But hey, my dad wasn't in the hospital anymore. He was at her house, so he was safe. I didn't get to walk in the hospital and talk to my dad. For 2 days, I called my aunt, begging my aunt, please, my son didn't do anything. So I left it at that. I called in the morning, and my dad's cousin picked up, and of course she said, here, to my dad's sister, take this. I can't deal with her. And I simply said, when can we bring my son over to see my dad? And my aunt says you can't. He passed away at 3:30 in the morning. So then I'm left with my son and I not even getting to say goodbye. And I kept calling and saying I was going to have a funeral for my dad. And nobody would tell me when or any other details because my dad had mad cow disease, Christopher Johnson syndrome, that it was contagious. So they immediately had to cremate his body. But that there was going to be a church service at a church. So I'm begging my aunt. Finally, she tells me, okay, here's the church service. Here's when it is. So I get to his funeral, but my Aunt Martha and Aunt Nettie left. And I'm looking at this board, and it has all these pictures of my dad through his life, even ones with my dad and me, which I was so surprised because his family hated me. So we were there for the wake. So I left it at that. I didn't know who the preacher was or anything. During the funeral, my older brother walks up to me. And this is 3 years after he admitted everything he did to me. And he goes, Dana, come with me. I'm going to take you to see Dad's ashes. It's the only chance I get. So my son and I walk into the room, and my dad's urn is there, and I lose it. Completely fall to the floor, bawling my eyes out. My son is hugging me and telling me it's going to be okay and helping me pick me back up. And once I get up and I'm just holding my dad's urn crying, he told me that we were all going to get a little bit of the ashes for a necklace, and then the rest of my dad's ashes would be buried on top of my paternal grandmother and my paternal grandfather. So I start living in the new place in January of 2022, and unfortunately my mother had to stay with me in the house until April 2022. During that time, even though she'd annoy me by me saying the same thing 20 times, I still built a relationship with her. I saw it anger because she left my dad. I still had anger because she wasn't there for me when my dad passed away. I still had anger for, her letting everything happen. And I started going to visit her and my aunt and staying there for the weekend. Or she'd come down to my house. So we built this relationship, and my aunt simply said to her one day, hey, your daughter needs you to take acknowledgement, and she needs you to apologize. So my mother took acknowledgement and she apologized, and now we have a great relationship. She's rebuilding the one with my son. I just wish my brother would have some kind of punishment for what he did. And I'm scared to publish the book because what if people put it to me and then my brother sues me or something?